those two. Some of the people have talked about urban planning also, but not that many people have talked about a very important concept, at least to me, and it's about urban space. The urban space with the different states. So, and I would like to address this question, this specific question, to our guests, and in order to know how the urban space has been important for them, for their organization, in order to work strategies for their own work.
How urban space as a concept is very important. I'd like to start by saying that the groups that we work with in Tacloban, and Sabiba for that matter, have been labeled as urban poor. They are identified because of the location that they are in, which is the urban. They are identified with it because they are poor. That has helped us frame the kind of responses or interventions we have done. For one, we have made a critique of the term urban and poor. It's a label that to us is very derogatory in the sense that aside from being a poor person living in that urban space, we also have other things that you should also be recognized for. For example, you are a worker in a factory, you are a vendor that peddles a lot of things so that you can eat 3 times a day, you are a cargador or stevedore. You are you may be poor, but you contribute to the economy of that particular urban space. Hence, if you contribute to the local economy of that certain urban space, then you should also have you should also be able to be provided with certain services that benefits you as a person living in that space. Meaning, being a urban poor person does not define you. It's not the only thing that should identify you, but your function aside from being poor. Being poor is already an event. The space that you are in being poor is also an event. But you should not be relegated to just that identity. Governments should also respond to the needs that they have. Housing, the need for services wherever they are, water, for example, sanitation, for example, even educational facilities should be provided for these people, not only because they are urban poor as labeled, but also because they are persons that have human rights, and they are persons that have human rights contributing to the local economy, not only for their survival, but also to contribute for the survival of a certain barangay or city local government unit. So it's important to us as an organization because it helps frame the kind of interventions we have, whether it's direct interventions with the people that we work with or advocacy at the level of the government.
Urban space. I think we have to, I'd like to categorize or to clarify urban space. We can look at it as urban area, vis-a-vis rural area, and therefore we also need to look at issues in terms of urban-rural linkages because urban areas cannot exist without rural areas. There has to be linkages, relationships, and mutual mutual advantage in terms of their relationship. But also within the urban area, or what we call the urban fabric, it is also important to highlight the importance of public space in the urban area, because especially in urban areas, there is an increasing scarcity of urban space. And the higher the density of the urban area, the higher the need for urban space, for public urban space, because you need the public space for social interaction, you need the public space for a lot of activities, and also it is in a common public space that urban dwellers meet and interact as equals. Because we know that in an urban area we have a lot of economic levels and a lot of occupations, but in a real public space like parks and streets, that's where people, urban dwellers, meet and interact as equals. So it's very important. And in fact, the United Nations, the Family of Nations, have recognized the importance of public space. And right now, after the Millennium Development Goals, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the Sustainable Development Goal target is actually increasing the public space within cities for cities to be called, inclusive and sustainable. Thank you.
How the WFP works strategically on urban areas or urban space. For the World Food Program, as a humanitarian organization, there's a very big difference between urban areas and rural areas, because in urban areas we have to consider the different set of livelihood that they have within the area, which cannot be rehabilitated immediately, that can be assured them for their food security. While in the rural areas, there are other spaces that can be utilized, that they can start up again their economic livelihood, that can assure them of their food security. So there should be some sort of different approaches to this affair. As far as the responses is concerned, we can mobilize other rural areas, the community themselves immediately to start up their livelihood. But for the rural areas, we have to collaborate, and there should be a very intense collaboration and coordination with the different livelihood providers or the employers of these people within the urban communities, so that the food security of the people that were affected by emergencies will not be prolonged and can be responded immediately in collaboration with different stakeholders at the urban area.
I would start by saying that that's a very architectural question. And that I wish, the reality is we often don't speak about urban space when we're doing emergency response. We talk about urban areas, we talk about different needs in urban areas and rural areas, we talk about urban displacement, but we really don't talk about urban space in the way that I think that you were asking. And that has to do because everything that is related to urban is a lot more complicated to deal with. It involves a lot more engagement with the authorities that actually have the decision power to decide upon urban space. And therefore that complicates things in terms of when we, again, are operating a very tight schedule and thinking about setting ups. Having said all of this, there's more and more work that is being done to address urban space as part of the key requirement when we're assessing or assisting in needs of the affected population. And there's more and more efforts towards looking at urban solutions, such as rental housing, supporting the market of rental housing, looking at deconcession and then areas that were informal settlers are. But all of that implies change, and change implies time, and often we don't have that time.
you already realize, this forester represents four ways, four tools on how institutions, private or public, cope with disasters. Okay? But we recently learned in one of the last presentation that it can be different the way of coping with natural disasters or coping with man-made disasters. Okay? And I would like to know for your organization or for your strategies, providing shelter, providing housing, providing human development, or even providing logistics, which is the difference when you work in a natural disaster approach or when you work in a man-made disaster approach.
It's quite difficult topic. Even the experience that my organization has had in the context of the era that happened in 2013. A lot of the people that we work with in the distant communities have experienced flooding in whatever forms, but not in the same magnitude as the ones in Dome, Pablo, Ayan. But our response was to provide, they needed assistance to be brought into evacuation centers, then we would do that. If we needed to organize people to help cook food, we brought those who cannot leave their houses for fear of losing a lot of their properties, but they are away, we would do that. In the context of the war, I am using the word guerra here because this is the term that the children in the children's center that we have has used. Siege has a different context, but guerra is more real to these children. It really caught us by surprise. It was a difficult moment for us as an organization, individually as Katilingban, and even as Sabina, with other organizations, because we knew that the war may have been initiated by a certain group, but the decision to go into war against this group was made by a few people whom we feel did not really take into account what their decision would result to. For example, when the decision was made to come out with a resolution, city resolution, to declare the crisis level after the fourth degree, which was then used as the basis for the decision to go after this using force, armed force. There was no clear indicator whether or not they knew what was going to happen. This is an urban area, and to have such a kind, to have war, armed conflict in an urban area is really very difficult. It's a lot different when you have war in a rural area, like as we experience in Central Mindanao, or in Basilan, or in Colosulu for that matter. We tried our best to respond to the needs of people that were affected. And the effect on the war here was not only those where the fighting was happening, but it also affected all the other people in the urban areas. The tricycle drivers could not drive a tricycle. They would not have any income. The lavanderas, the wash women could not do washing for people in the centers because everybody was quite scared of what to do. The vendors couldn't sell their wares because there was war going on. So even if they were not in what people would call ground zero, these were also affected. But even as we did respond to the needs for food, our organization tried as much as possible to influence decision making at another level. Don't go to war. That did not happen. We tried to be part of the negotiations. Another one is, okay, there's war already, but please declare it a humanitarian crisis. So things like that. It's advocacy at another level. And it was a very difficult decision because we felt that we were not listened to.
I think whether it's natural or man-made, a disaster is a disaster. And the impacts are really great in terms of affecting the quality of life of those affected. But I think when a disaster strikes, more or less it affects everybody, although the vulnerabilities are different. It's the same, almost the same for man-made, but I think the motivation is different, and therefore the response would be different. I remember when we were discussing our response for the Cotabato and projects, sometimes the reason for the response is not because that is the most logical thing. For example, in a natural disaster, that is the most logical thing because that will strengthen, that the road will bring you there. Or that is the best facility that needs to be done there, given the magnitude, given the volume of people that needs to be affected. But in a peace situation or in a peace conflict situation, the reason for certain projects are not because that is the most logical thing. And it could be as simple as that project is for peace building. And peace building has a different logic from humanitarian, right? So it's something like that. The impacts could be very similar, but the response and the sensitivity of your response to cultural sensitivities, political sensitivities would be very different under a man-made crisis than a natural crisis.
I can say that there is a very big difference understanding the natural disaster and the conflict affected areas. So for the natural disaster, we should only strengthen the collaboration and coordination to have a synchronized approach in responding to the needs of the people that were affected, taking into account the do no harm principle at the same time, the exclusion and inclusion of the different stakeholders, particularly the affected population on the ground. So we have to understand that kind of dynamics within the different stakeholders because and the different organizations, there's instead of being collaborative with each other, they have become competitive with each other. So we have to raise that kind of culture. And then another thing for the natural disaster is you have one vision to really rehabilitate and assist those people that were affected by the emergency or the natural disaster. And then for the general solution is to have a collaborative plan, how to bring back better the destroyed assets and livelihood of the people that were affected by the natural disaster. While in conflict situation, we have to weigh the different thinking and dynamics of the warring parties. Like for example, for the MILF and the GPAs, BIFF, MLF, affected areas in Mindanao, we have to consider the different groups, particularly that we cannot collaborate very well with the government because they are also a party of the conflict. So if the government is a party of the conflict, that the collaboration with them can also harm the immediate response because these other parties that were involved will not or cannot accept the assistance that you will be providing because they might be telling that that is only a showcase for the government for them to stop the struggle that they have started. And then, aside from the understanding or weighing the concerns of the warring parties, we have to, as a humanitarian organization, being neutral and impartial, we have to weigh the concerns of the warring parties or the warring organizations. And then, of course, to coordinate from the top to bottom. We are not coordinating from bottom to top because they have their structure of command. So if there's a chain of command as far as the government of the Philippines is concerned, there is also a certain structure being followed by the different struggling groups. Like for the MILF, they have the Central Committee. The MNLF, they have committees with different factions. We have to consider all those factions, plus the BIFF, plus the private armed groups. So that can spoil every move to assist the affected population. So we have to consider the different dynamics of those groups. And then understand the affiliations of the affected population. Before providing assistance to the affected population, we have to understand the affiliations of the affected population. We should not go there and then telling what we wanted them to become or just give them the assistance that they cannot even understand or they don't understand where it came from. So we have to understand very well the affiliations. If they are members of the MNLF or they are members of the other groups or any other armed groups in the area. And then of course for durable solution, this is the overarching mechanisms for peace building that needs conflict transformation and later on reconciliation before doing any durable solution or development activities that need be undertaken within the conflict affected areas. And most of all, we have to consider governance, not only the governance of the government, but the governance of the struggling party.
Well, besides the points that my colleagues already mentioned, I would add one, which is one big difference and one implication is usually the time of displacement. When you think of displacement caused by man-made disasters, usually it's likely that that displacement will be protracted in time because it takes a lot more time to solve the problem when it's a conflict-based problem. And that makes also return more challenging when you think that it's not only, for instance, a sheltering problem or an education problem, but it's the tensions that are lying within the community. And that's our colleague from Zamboanga, what she described, that culture of peace that needs to be added into the whole process. And that means that then you have to look into providing assistance and considering the needs of people that will not be at their place of origin for a long, long time.
For my third question, I have no more questions. You know why? Because when you moderate a panel after two other panels moderated by Spanish architects also, the risk of repeating the questions is very high. So I would like to invite any of the Eastern Visayas State University to make one question to our panelists or to the experts that intervened this morning. So, any of you interested in making one question, please, you can borrow the microphone. I'm not going to wait that much, so but a little bit more. course. So I'm very sure any of you have very interesting questions for our panelists. Otherwise, it's going to be me to make a question for you. Okay, so last try. You have no question? Sure? So I will make my question for you. And it's a very easy question, which was already made in the second, by the second moderator, architect Jesus Pulido, about the role of an architect in this kind of situation. We've been listening to so many architects and urban planners today, but we have been listening also the importance of the community participation. So, if the community is the main actor, or at least we have heard that in most of the presentation, which is the role of the architect or the urban planner in building housing, developing shelter, transitional or not, and working with urban logistics, or developing urban plans. Any of you would like to answer this question?
For me, the role of an architect as an urban redevelopment planner is that the architect should hear or should listen to the community, because what he makes for the community is, what he planned is for the community. So if he knows what the community needs, then perhaps he can design something that would be really effective for the community. Of course, the architect should not only be the designer, but also an architect should an architect should help the community to be aware of what are the causes of these disasters. Like, for example, they should, like what Mr. Funo has said earlier, that nature is really important in the community, and so an architect should not only build for his own purposes, like for profit or something like that, but he should also build with the essence of protecting the community as well as nature.
Anybody else? One more at least. The problem of the experts in this kind of symposium is that we're really get tired of listening to each other. We know each other very well. But you know, the good thing is that the 100% of them, all these experts from Japan, from the Philippines, from Portugal, they have been students like you. They have been a student, I can promise. All of them, they have been students. So they have been in your situation. So please take advantage of this situation and make questions. This is the only way to learn. Somebody told us this morning that there is no time for learning or for teaching. It is the whole life task. So please do it. Everybody's ready? Where is I people? Okay, so anyway, okay, as I don't want to be accused by my colleagues of really the problem with the dinner. Okay, I would like really to any of the experts to answer this question. Any of the experts who were in the panel 2 to answer this question about the role of the architect in this kind of, the architect, sorry, or the urban planner in this kind of situation. Also, any of you, if you would like to answer.
So the answer of mine is very concise. I think the worst or bad architects are those who design for themselves. And good architects are those who listen to the community, what the community wants to do. And the best one is harmonize, who can harmonize those things. So not only to listen to what the community says, it's sometimes wrong. So as an expert, they must not be obedient to what the community says, but not selfish, but who can combine those two components. That's all.
I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts into that question. One is, when we're, and again, I'm talking specifically about disaster response. The one thing that happens is that we architects and all the other respondents, we are dictated by the rhythm that people actually start rebuilding on their own. So how do we keep up with their pace? How do we ensure that if we have a role, it's a role that they value, that they want us to actually be involved, and how do they listen to us if we listen to them? So that's one of the thoughts that I just wanted to put there, because people will build without us. That is guaranteed. The other thing, if I can, is more of a question and a provocation. After all that you heard, and this is my question to the students, hopefully someone will answer. One of the things that we often deal when we architects are doing disaster responses, when we see these international competitions for shelter design, and there's this magical prefab that is going to solve the shelter problem of the world. What would be your thoughts after all that you heard today about that, if anyone has any?
It's a very demanding panel. think about those two very important questions about architects and urban planners. It is the main, how should I say, the main reason why all of us we are here today. Okay. So I think
So for the future architects, we have to look at the perspective of the disaster preparedness and mitigation. For disaster preparedness, you can see the area of, like for example, Tacloban City. And then based on the experience of Haiyan, we have difficulties in bringing the relief goods of emergency supplies or assistance needed in Tacloban areas. So you have to plan, as part of the preparedness, look into where are the specific docking points if the areas that is usually used is not available, is not being used anymore. At the same time, look at the perspective of what we did earlier, that we use the helicopters and the transportation to drop the food where the people affected were. So look at those perspectives. If this Tacloban City, knock on wood, will again experience the same, at least there are already some areas that it's already been can be used logistically to transport the needed assistance for the affected population. For the mitigation, of course, we have to balance the ecology and the environmental protection in all the architectural design and urban planning that we are looking at to beautify and to make the Tacloban City competitive to the world.
Yeah. I am not an architect. That's why I envy architects, but I'm a visual artist. And I always consider architects also as artists of space and the built form. And when we look at Tacloban, we're actually, as Maria said earlier, we're actually almost looking at a tabula rasa, where you actually have almost the whole city that you can build according to architectural designs and visions. And the way Tacloban will look 10, 20 years from now, it will be a statement of how you as architects took that opportunity or missed that opportunity to build a better, more beautiful Tacloban than it is now. So being architects is a privilege, it is also a responsibility. And I think the future is very, very bright for you to actually practice your craft. In many situations, in situations like we were discussing this earlier, in Europe, there is not a big field for you to practice your profession anymore because almost everything is built. Here in Tacloban, you have all the opportunity to practice your craft, and therefore you should take that challenge and better be very good architects. Because if you're not good architects, I think that is what Tacloban will be. Will not be a good, beautiful Tacloban. And that is in your hands. Thank you.
One last note, I was talking earlier with I asked why you have a College of Architecture and Fine Arts. But is that the same thing here in EDSU? No, it's College of Architecture and related allied disciplines, so different things. But I'd like to emphasize here, whether it's allied disciplines or fine arts, having worked with communities who have been rendered voiceless by some structures and who struggle now to be heard, the art of listening is a very, very important skill that I hope you as architects to be, or architects already, would have. For example, why would a mother insist on having the door face the east? In architectural parlance or architectural design, what does that mean? Why would a child want to have a bigger room? Or in the context of disaster response, why would people want a bigger space for play, or a bigger space, a common space, even in areas where you barely have enough space for a tent, a common space, a child-friendly space, a women-friendly space? Where do the architects come in? Is it just the physical space, or is it the meanings attached to the space? So it's not just physical itself, but it's the meanings that people give to all these spaces. The urban space that Carlos was saying earlier. When you decide to have these spaces designated for this or that, who gets excluded and who gets included? Because meanings will always vary depending on who in the community you're responding to. The challenge is to be inclusive as much as possible, recognizing the different meanings we have to all these spaces, but at the same time, not losing what we're supposed to be doing as architects, considering that it has to be durable, it has to be sturdy, things like that. So, yung challenge lang, an invitation, ko sa you're working with different communities and organizations, is be an architect that recognizes spaces, but be an architect to also listen to what people bring to all these spaces. The meanings should be part of your work as an architect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our last set of speakers, Architect Maria Moita, Mr. Christopher E. Rolio, Ms. Macy Degapios, and Mr. Michael Argonza, and for the moderator, Mr. Carlos Gallego. To formally end this conference, we would like to call on Mr. Kay Pinohora for the closing remarks. A round of applause, please.
Well, it's a long, long day, and you must be very much tired. And so my closing remarks should be in very short. Well, I learned a lot within the day, and it's really, the symposium is fruitful, I believe. And I hope that all of you here present agree with me. And so I happily, thanks to the organizing team to create this fruitful symposium. Especially I'm grateful to the Professor Jose Ramon and his clan, and especially the people from the Tacloban city to cooperate to create this symposium. Thank you very much. Now, I'm quite an old man, and learning from the past experiences, I believe that big disasters are not something like quite exceptional or never kind of gain kind of the incidents. On the contrary, these kind of the disasters are a part of a human living environment, human history. So you have to endure with that. The problem is how do we understand, we conceive these disasters. But if we accept this, the disasters as a reality, then what matters is the resilient power of the people who suffer. That's a basic, fundamental key factor. And in order to rely upon the resilience of the people, we have to rely upon the indigenous factors like local material, local technology, and even if it's the global economy and business-oriented, or still appropriate technology should be incorporated rather than high-tech, the most advanced technology. That's one factor. And the second factor is people's strong will to stand up again. And you see, in order to have this kind of strong will, you have to cooperate with the other people in the area. So the community participation and the participation of the people to reconstruct and survive again from the disasters is another very important key factor. But it seems that if we learn to abide the disaster and to reconcile them, then it seems this way of understanding leads to a new kind of more comprehensive, more flexible strategies for urban process management. And we need a new way of attitude and strategy and methodologies to solve this kind of problems. But I believe we have started to understand this gradually. And I hope the symposium has served as a stepping board for a new understanding of this approach and to tackle with the problems we commonly share. So let's go together into a new future with the same goal. The earth full of risks. But I firmly believe that human beings can face this reality and can survive through it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And of course, we would like to thank our amazing speakers. Guys, can you please say thank you? Thank you so much. Arigato, gracias. Maraming salamat sa ating mga amazing speakers. A round of applause to everyone, please. And for now, we may go on all the speakers and the guests to come up in this stage for picture taking. Thank you so much. Of course, we would like to thank the Japan Society for Asian Pacific Community Studies, Japan Foundation, the University of Shiga Prefecture, Eastern Visayas State University, and the City of Tacloban.